sky me, where brains go to broadcast.
Welcome to our discussion today. We're going to be tackling, I think, one of the most crucial pieces of advice for any academic writer.
Absolutely. We're talking about the introduction.
You know that feeling, right? You've spent hours, maybe days, building the core of your paper. The evidence is there, the analysis. The body paragraphs feel solid. But then you scroll back up to the top of the page.
Yeah.
That introduction, it just stares you down. The intro and the conclusion, they can feel like the most intimidating parts to write.
They really can. It's like you said, you've built this amazing engine, but you don't have the chassis or the hood to hold it all together.
Exactly.
And that anxiety is, it's pretty universal, but I think it helps to understand what the introduction's real job is.
Which is?
Fundamentally, it's a bridge. It's not just a formality, not just warming up. It has to literally transport the reader.
Transport them from where?
From their life. From, whatever they were doing 5 minutes ago, checking email, making coffee.
Watching cat videos.
Watching cat videos, yeah. It has to pull them from that world into the very specific, very focused intellectual world of your paper.
Okay, so that framing the bridge from their world to my specific territory, that's the whole game.
It is. If you're writing a paper about, say, literacy in Frederick Douglass's narrative, the intro has to gently pull your reader out of the 21st century and plant them, just for a little while, in the world of 19th century American slavery.
And if that bridge isn't built well,
They never truly arrive. They'll just struggle to engage with all the nuance you've built into the rest of the paper.
So for everyone listening, our goal today is pretty straightforward. We want to establish why this first paragraph is probably the most high-stakes part of your entire paper.
Then we'll get into some really actionable writing strategies.
Right, things you can use immediately. And finally, we'll give you the tools to spot and to, permanently avoid the 5 most common, I'd say grade-killing introductory mistakes. Okay, let's start with those stakes. Why is good enough just not acceptable when it comes to the introduction?
Because it's your one and only chance to make a first impression.
Right.
Especially on a reader who is grading, dozens of papers on the same topic. The second they start reading, they're already forming an opinion about your argument, your style, your confidence.
So if the opening is vague or disorganized?
They start with a negative assumption, a bad baseline. They're already thinking the rest of the paper will be a slog.
That initial goodwill is just so valuable. A clean, compelling intro is like a well-dressed professional walking into a job interview.
Yeah.
It just signals competence right away.
It makes the reader want to read what you have to say. And functionally, it's not just a nice opening, it's the paper's roadmap, a comprehensive roadmap.
Okay, I have a roadmap. What does it need to show?
It has to communicate 3 vital pieces of information, and it fails if it misses even one.
Let's break down that checklist.
Okay, first, what is the topic? Simple enough. Second, why is this topic important? Why should anyone care? And third, and this is the one people often forget, how are you going to approach the discussion?
The how, meaning the structure.
Yeah. The structure, the kinds of evidence you'll use, maybe the theoretical lens you're applying. It sets expectations.
And the centerpiece of that roadmap, the big glowing destination point, has to be the thesis. Right.
Always. In almost all academic writing, the introduction must contain a thesis. That's your main argument, stated clearly, non-negotiable.
And a really good thesis does more than just state the claim.
Oh, absolutely. A great thesis also hints at the evidence that supports it and the general direction the paper is headed.
I remember being told once to try and build suspense, to maybe hide the thesis until the 3rd paragraph or something. Is that ever a good idea?
Almost never. I mean, not in standard academic papers. If you hide your claim, you're just forcing the reader to guess what they're supposed to be looking for. It's confusing.
So you put it right there in the intro, usually near the end.
Yes. You set their expectations so perfectly that when they move into the body paragraphs, there are 0 surprises. Every sentence they read just confirms the path you already told them you were taking.
So the goal isn't suspense, it's an invitation.
An invitation to an interesting intellectual conversation. And that invitation needs a hook. Something to make them feel invested from the very first sentence.
Like what? A statistic?
A stunning statistic, a short anecdote, a really powerful quotation, or even just a challenging question. Something that shows them right away why your analysis matters.
Okay, let's get tactical. We're all staring at that blinking cursor on a blank page. Where do we actually begin?
The best place to start is the assignment prompt itself. the question you're trying to answer.
Because the whole essay is just a response to that question.
Exactly. And the direct answer is your thesis statement. If you know the question you're solving, you already know your destination.
And sometimes the prompt itself gives you a structure for the introduction. Like if it starts broad and then narrows down.
You can just mirror that, absolutely. Think of that broad to narrow structure like a funnel. You start with the most general idea that's still relevant to your topic.
So with the Douglas example, if the prompt is about education and social change, you'd start there with the big idea.
You would. But you have to make that transition feel smooth, not clunky.
Can you walk us through how that might sound?
Sure. You might start with something broad, like, the history of social progress is often tied directly to access to knowledge, positioning literacy as a critical first act of self-liberation.
Okay, that's the big picture.
Then you narrow it. However, this link becomes brutally clear when you look at systems designed specifically to suppress it. And then finally, you land on your specific argument.
The thesis.
Frederick Douglass's narrative, therefore, shows how literacy becomes more than just learning. It becomes a direct, actionable weapon against the ideology of slavery. You see how we moved from abstract progress to a concrete thesis.
But to the Google Maps analogy you mentioned, if I'm writing about a specific street, I don't need to start with a view of the entire galaxy.
Exactly. We all want to provide context, but zooming out too far is a waste of time. Saying something like, since the dawn of man, people have valued freedom.
You're just wasting words.
You're wasting precious real estate that could be used to set up your specific argument. Keep the context relevant.
Now, for what might be the most liberating piece of advice for any writer, do I actually have to write the introduction first?
Not only do you not have to, but I often recommend writing it last.
Really?
Yes. The writing process itself is a process of discovery. You might start out thinking your argument is X, but after you've worked through all the evidence, you realize it's actually X plus Y, or maybe it's Z.
So if I write the body paragraphs first, I can make sure my introduction perfectly matches the paper I actually wrote.
Precisely. A tentative introduction is fine to get you started, but you absolutely have to go back at the very end and revise it to make sure it's an honest roadmap to the final draft.
Let's talk about those attention grabbers again. Using the Douglas text as an example, what are some powerful ways to hook a reader right from the start?
The best hooks usually come from some kind of tension in the material. An intriguing example works wonders. You could start with the moment Douglas's mistress, who was at first kind to him, suddenly becomes a monster when she learns that teaching a slave to read is forbidden. That immediate change creates a problem for the reader to solve.
Or you could just use a provocative quotation.
Yes, hit them with something that captures the whole argument, like Douglas himself saying that education and slavery were incompatible with each other.
I like the idea of a puzzling scenario.
That creates so much tension. You could point out the incredible length slave owners went to cripple their intellects, the violence, the laws, and then immediately show how Douglas's life proves those efforts fail. The reader is immediately asking, how did he do it?
And of course, the classic thought-provoking question is always good.
A great tool. Why, with all the other horrors of slavery, did Douglas focus so intensely on literacy? It forces the reader to start thinking along with you.
And your final strategy is about tone.
Yeah.
It's about confidence.
Yes. Avoid those weak self-referential statements at all costs.
You mean things like, in this paper, I will argue that, or I will attempt to show.
Exactly. Or this essay hopes to explore. It's not convincing. If you don't sound like you believe your own argument, why should anyone else? Be declarative.
So instead of, I will argue that Douglas valued education.
Just say it. Frederick Douglass understood literacy not as a benefit, but as a direct existential threat to the institution of slavery. Assert your argument. Don't just propose it.
Okay, that brings us to spotting the weaknesses in our own writing. Before we get into the 5 common pitfalls, you mentioned a simple test for an introduction.
Yes, this is the best way to see if your roadmap actually works. Give a friend or a classmate only your introduction, nothing else. And ask them to predict 3 things: what the paper is about, what kind of evidence you'll use, and what the overall tone and conclusion will be.
And if they can predict all that accurately,
Your introduction is strong. If they get to your body paragraphs and are surprised by what they find, your introduction has failed. It's that simple.
let's dive into those failures.
Yeah.
Pitfall number 1, the placeholder.
Ah, yes. This is the enemy of a confident declarative statement. The placeholder is just a series of vague, empty sentences that are there to take up space because the writer doesn't really have an argument yet.
It's like you're treading water. Sentences like, slavery was a great tragedy in American history. It affected many people in different ways.
It sounds important, but it says nothing. It commits to nothing. It's just filler.
Okay, pitfall 2, the restated question.
This is when a writer, maybe in a panic, just spends the whole paragraph rewording the professor's prompt.
But the professor wrote the question. They already know it.
They wrote it, and they're reading 30 essays on it. They're desperate for you to get to your unique angle, not to hear the question again. Redundancy is deadly.
Pitfall number 3, this one's a classic, the Webster's Dictionary opening.
Webster's Dictionary defines slavery as, please never do this. It's a waste of space for a few reasons. 1, it's just boring and overused. Everyone does it.
Okay.
2, it gives authority to a generic source when you should be using a scholarly one from your class. And 3,
What's the third?
it has no specific relevance to your course. If you need to define a term like literacy, it is so much more powerful to use a definition from one of your required readings.
So you're grounding the term in the specific conversation of the class.
You're grounding it in the right context. Brilliant. Okay, pitfall number 4, the dawn of man introduction.
This is when that broad to narrow structure goes completely off the rails.
Completely. Massive, sweeping statements like throughout human history or since the beginning of time.
Human beings have always struggled for freedom.
It's way too vague. It doesn't connect clearly to your thesis. Remember the Google Maps anatomy? You've zoomed out so far you can't even see your subject anymore.
And finally, pitfall number 5. This one is so tempting when you're trying to hit a word count. The book report.
Yes. This is when you just offer up basic, irrelevant facts about the text that your reader already knows.
Like, Frederick Douglass wrote his autobiography in 1845. It was published by the Anti-Slavery Society.
Your professor knows that. Everyone in the class knows that. They don't need a Wikipedia summary. They need your analysis. If you find yourself just listing publication facts, it's a huge red flag that you haven't found your argument yet.
Okay, let's wrap this up and summarize the takeaways. The introduction is your bridge, your roadmap. It tells the reader the what, the why, and the how.
And success really hinges on being declarative, specific, and confident.
And remembering that powerful strategy. It's okay, even recommended, to write it last, to make sure it perfectly aligns with your final argument.
And here's a final thought for you to take with you. We've talked a lot about how the introduction needs to prevent surprises for the reader.
Right.
But what if your argument is genuinely complex, with multiple layers of logic or different kinds of evidence? So the question to mull over is this. How does the complexity of your argument change the level of detail you need in your introduction?
So it's about making sure the journey is still smooth, even if the terrain is more complicated.
Exactly. How do you find that perfect balance between giving enough detail to be compelling, but holding just enough back to keep the body paragraphs flowing? That's the next level.
Calibrating the roadmap. That's a great point to end on. Thank you for joining us for this session. We look forward to seeing the roadmaps you build.
Cascade me where brains go to broadcast. Cascade me, knowledge speaks, tuition sleeps.